Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm Kris. So, this is part 2. Looks like Harmar is about to engage in a battle. That's why I cut the other one a little bit short. But this is America's First Defeat, Northwest Frontier, 1790 from Epic History TV. Before we get started, there's a thanks button. You can donate, don't have to. Subscribe if you'd like to, and thumbs up mandatory, please. Requesting, please. Alright.
But once more, they stumble into an ambush. In confused fighting, more than 100 U.S. soldiers are killed, scalped, and left where they've fallen. Today, many mistakenly believe scalping to have been an exclusively Native American practice. In fact, for more than a century, it had been widely taken up by European settlers, often with encouragement from colonial authorities who paid bounties for native scalps as proof of death. What had begun as a ritual practice among certain tribes had become far more widespread, and was now routinely carried out by both sides in the frontier wars. Harmar returns with his shaken force to Fort Washington, where he claims success. He has, after all, destroyed 5 Miami villages and considerable grain stores. It is a heavy blow to the tribes and will mean great hardship that winter. But others saw it differently. The expedition has gone down in history as Harmar's defeat. And at the time, it was the largest U.S. defeat by Native Americans. Harmar is later exonerated by a court-martial, but his reputation never recovers. That winter, both sides continue their raids across the Northwest Territory. In January 1791, at Big Bottom, Lenape and Wyandot warriors kill 12 settlers, including 2 children. Such attacks spread alarm across the territory and threaten the entire U.S. project of settlement, upon which powerful interests now depend. Settlers fear to travel west. Land speculators are up in arms. President Washington now turns to the governor of the Northwest Territory, 54-year-old Scottish-born Arthur Sinclair. Sinclair had plenty of military experience. Like Washington, he'd served as a British officer in the French and Indian War. And in '59, he'd stormed the heights of Quebec with General Wolfe. During the Revolutionary War, he joined the Continental Army and was with Washington when he crossed the Delaware. But his record was tarnished in 1777 by his decision to abandon Fort Ticonderoga to the British without a fight. Sinclair now suffers from severe gout, but this does not dissuade President Washington from giving him the rank of Major General and orders to launch a second expedition against the Northwestern Confederacy. This time, the tribes must be taught a severe and unequivocal lesson: comply with U.S. demands or face annihilation. Congress authorizes the raising of a second regular infantry regiment for the expedition. However, the prospect of frontier service is so unenticing that it proves impossible to recruit enough men to fill its ranks. Sinclair's force will number not the 3,000 or 4,000 men originally envisaged, but around 2,000. These include 500 regular infantry from the 1st and 2nd Regiment, 100 mounted dragoons, and 10 3-pounder and 6-pounder cannon. The 1st and 2nd Levy Regiments provide 800 short-service volunteers, though almost all of these are raw recruits. Of the militia, Captain Faulkner's Pennsylvanian riflemen are experienced frontier fighters, but there's only 60 of them, while most of the 400 Kentucky militia are completely inexperienced. The Northwestern Confederacy knows that their victory over General Harmar will not go unanswered, and they too prepare for another U.S. attack. For the tribes, it is a daunting prospect, a battle for survival in which they know their families, villages, and livelihoods will be targeted indiscriminately. But the common threat brings together warriors from a dozen tribes, about 1,400 in all, making it one of the largest Native American armies ever assembled on the frontier. Miami War Chief Little Turtle will again play a leading role, alongside Blue Jacket and Bakongahelas. War chiefs organize the warriors according to tribe and language, and they are well armed. Many carry Brown Bess muskets, supplied by the British at Fort Detroit. For close combat, they carry clubs, tomahawks, and knives. Many warriors will paint their face before battle, a ritual preparation for combat that also serves to terrify the enemy. Summer 1791. Sinclair's orders are to leave Fort Washington no later than July 10th and return to the Miami villages at Kikayange. President Washington particularly warns him to be alert for ambushes on the march. Once Sinclair has eliminated all resistance at Kikayange, he is to build a fort and garrison it with 1,200 men. This stronghold will allow the U.S. to assert its control of the area and counter British influence from Fort Detroit. The British are supposed to have evacuated this outpost following the Revolutionary War, but they have not done so, and now use it as a base to encourage and support Native American resistance to the U.S.
I just want to pause on that part. When people say, well, look what you did to the natives. Okay, we did. We killed a lot of them. They killed us. We killed probably more of them. But when early colonists showed up, the Pilgrims, all the way to the start of the colonies, that was sanctioned by the British. The British understood what was going on. They understood what was here. That was sanctioned. French came here. The French became the French became allies with some of them, some of the natives. They're fighting. They became allies with them. When wars broke out, they encouraged them to strike the British and the colonists. Revolutionary War breaks out. The British convince some of the natives to strike out at the colonists, now Americans. War of 1812, same thing. Even this, same thing. I'm just trying to point out that Americans always get blamed for what they did to them, but they are really silent on the fact that the French, the Spanish, the British all encouraged them to attack. So it's not like we just wandered into their backyard all the time, which we did. Not saying we didn't, but there was also an encouragement for violence against them, against the early Americans, which was sponsored by those countries. But those countries always get left out of what they did, and it always gets turned on what the Americans did. And I just want to point that out, that a lot of that may not have happened, a lot of those deaths, but they did, but they may not have happened had also, it wasn't encouraged, but also if the natives just were like, no, we don't want any part of it. But the natives were being played by those other countries, and in some aspects to the Americans, because the Americans would use them to fight the British, the French, the Spanish, and then would go back on their word, just like the British would go back on their word, the French, the Spanish. And so in the end, it was like the natives were swayed, and then they were left. So I just want to point out that it's not like the Americans just completely did 100% bad stuff. Not trying to defend it, but I'm also it's indefensible. But I'm also trying to point out that those other countries seem to get a pass for what they did. A lot of people will bring up the smallpox blankets that were given out, that the Americans gave the natives, which infected and killed a bunch of them. But the British were the first ones to do that. That gets glossed over. So I'm just pointing this stuff out because if there's blame should be spread out to every party, not just one. And we are one of the people and one of the countries that does deserve blame. I'm not trying to gloss over that either.
Sinclair's expedition, however, is in trouble before it can even set off. The U.S. Army's supply system relies on private contractors, most of whom are brazenly corrupt. They have pocketed most of the funds intended for the expedition, meaning Sinclair is seriously short of food, ammunition, and equipment. Precious weeks are lost as he urgently seeks to secure proper supplies for his troops, while rush training the many raw recruits in his force. Meanwhile, 2 preparatory attacks are launched against the Native Americans. In May, Brigadier General Charles Scott leads a mounted militia raid that burns several villages and takes 41 hostages to be used in future negotiations. 2 months later, Lieutenant Wilkinson leads a second raid that burns more villages and crops. They take 34 hostages, including the daughter of Miami War Chief Little Turtle. The raids are supposed to distract the tribes, to keep them off balance ahead of the main attack. All they really achieve is to enrage and unite the Northwestern Confederacy like never before. And when Sinclair's army is finally ready to march north that autumn, they will be ready and waiting. Back in the 18th century, as violence flared across America's Northwest Territory, it's fair to say the news reporting was not exactly balanced or objective. Of course, we live in a far more enlightened age, with balanced and accurate news at our fingertips. Or do we? Take the current Israel-Palestine conflict. Anyone following the conflict knows that information varies from reliable to biased to outright fabrication. But which is which? Now there's a website and app to help you understand where your news is coming from. Ground News is a way to reach or scanning our QR code. Ground News doesn't just aggregate the news from multiple sources. Every story comes with a quick visual, all back. Here's a story. You can see that left-leaning, and that also makes it easy.
Get back to the video, please.
Mentioning. saw it
Okay.
once. Easily now. Science and tech, finance, and everybody's favorite, weird news. It really is a one-stop shop for all your news, whatever your interests.
Was that the whole video?
Thank you to Osprey Publishing.
Really? It ends like that? Really? Oh, there's a part 2. Okay, that makes sense. All right. Okay. I see. All righty. Those paintings almost look like I'm looking at the tree, the warrior, the soldier, and I'm like, is this the same? No, it's not. Okay. Okay. There's a part 2. All right, that makes sense. Okay, so we're going to end it here. Sorry about that. I thought there was a little bit more. I was incorrect, which is not a first time. So we're going to end it here. And until next time, have a good day, have a good night.